So, welcome everyone. This is the Incarceration Prevention and Reduction Task Force Legal and Justice Systems Committee. Today is May 14th, and I'm Donnell Tanksley, Sheriff of Whatcom County, sitting in for Raylene King, one of the co-chairs. So, first on our agenda is the land acknowledgement. And Jill, we do have a quorum.
Yes.
Awesome. So, before we begin, we acknowledge that we're gathered on the traditional and unceded territory of the Lummi, Nooksack, Samish, and Semiahmoo people who have cared for and tended this land since time immemorial. Truth and acknowledgement are critical to building mutual respect and connection across all barriers of heritage and difference. We begin this effort to acknowledge what has been buried by honoring the truth. We pay respect to their elders, past and present. Please take a moment to consider the many legacies of violence, displacement, migration, and settlement that brings us together here today. And please join us in uncovering such truths at any and all public events. So I will call the meeting to order. So first on the agenda is the election of a committee co-chair. So currently we have Raylene King, who is one of the co-chairs. The second co-chair position was vacated. And do we have any nominations?
I'll nominate somebody.
Sure.
I believe that Eric Ritchie was, no, you're shaking your head, Raylene. Okay. All right. Well, no, he's shaking his head. All right.
I'm happy to nominate Donnell Tanksley.
I'll second that.
So, first off, I bowed out because I can't as an elected official. And Tank, you might be in the same position. Maybe I'm wrong about this. I don't know if you've evaluated that. But we've looked into this in my office, and I cannot do it as as an elected official.
I see. Mm-hmm.
So,
Jill, do you?
I hate to be a bummer there.
Yeah.
I beg your pardon?
Jill, is this something that you can address? An
No,
elected official
I defer to the prosecutor on that decision. Thank you.
Okay.
All right. Well, so a nomination was made and a nomination was second. At this point, in terms of the policies and regulations of the task force, I think this should be forwarded to the entire task force for review because I don't know. And I certainly would do it, but certainly don't want to cause any issues where I shouldn't do that. So looks like we have a hand raised. Is that you, Peter?
I think
I was Sheriff Tank. I'll move to table the motion while we get further legal advice on the eligibility for you to serve as co-chair.
Any second?
I'll second that.
So moved. All right. Well, certainly we appreciate the insight. So if not, we will find a co-chair for you, Raylene, for sure.
Jill here. We do have a motion to table on the floor that needs a vote.
That's true.
And Peter's hand is up also.
I'm concerned because Dan Hamill is an elected official. He's a co-chair, long-running co-chair of the Behavioral Health Committee. So if this is something we need to investigate, it would be really good to know. sooner rather than later. It's hard to imagine that we would have, this is an oversight of such proportion, but.
We are a county task force, and Eric and Sheriff Tank are county officials. Dan is not, so.
Is that the difference?
It may be.
Right. It might be.
Okay.
All right. So moving on, next, what we have is, it says warrant quash, and this is just an update on something that I've been working on, and really it's in its infancy. So the idea is to bring all of the courts in Whatcom County together on the same day, whether it's in the same building or at their individual locations, to address the number of warrants that we have here in Whatcom County. And not only Whatcom County, but many other jurisdictions in the past have had what they call a warrant quash day, or I mean, there are other names for it, but essentially it's to have folks come in to have their warrants addressed. Now, the quash does not mean to get rid of it. It does oftentimes reset the case, but also this is an opportunity, or could be an opportunity, for some jurisdictions to address the cases and perhaps adjudicate those cases during this time. I've met with District Court. Under Sheriff Harris has met with Superior Court. I've had brief conversations with the prosecutor's office and a brief conversation with the public defender's office. There are some other stakeholders that we have to invite here to the table. I have contacted the administration of Washington courts to get their thoughts on this, and to actually see if there's any assistance that they could potentially give us with this. So I'm waiting on an email from them. This idea is to address these thousands of warrants that we have in Whatcom County, which would also have an effect on modifying the current booking restrictions that we have here in Whatcom County. The research I've done is that we've been on some sort of booking restrictions probably since 1981, for the exception of the first 2 years of the current jail, that the current main jail, and then the first 2 years of opening the work center. So right now, every organization is hamstrung, if you will, with regard to people they can book and people they cannot book. There is, within the community, the other small cities, there's grave concern for them about their ability to book people in the jail. So this is one way, I believe, to notify folks that have warrants, give them a chance to come in and try to have those addressed. Some of the challenges that we might face is with something like this, if it's only doing a weekday, it's only doing working hours, then how do you address those people that might not be able to come during that time? So some of the challenges I talked to the administration of Washington courts is there any assistance maybe they could give us with regard to having the hours between perhaps 12 p.m. and 8 p.m. to give people time that are working later? I don't know. But what I do know is that by doing nothing, we're continuously having more and more warrants. And what I do know from just people I personally have known throughout the years is that working and trying to raise a family and do other things with these different warrants does present some challenges for folks. So this is one way for the community to address it and hopefully help some folks. So any questions?
I guess I've got a question. My understanding is that quash day or period was tried a number of years ago, and what were the results of that? And I'd be really interested in hearing from Mr. Ritchie about that, and what anybody's thoughts are on how we could best implement something like this.
Yeah, so I would say the participation, the people that showed up was relatively small, relatively, but it was very meaningful. The people that came in there were ecstatic about the idea of being able to get rid of their warrants and set up a court date. And frankly, it works. If people are coming in and saying, hey, I want to come back to court, I want an opportunity to do that, I think that's just positive for everyone. And I don't remember our numbers. I think it was below 20 people, but again, that was meaningful to them. So I support the idea. I think tanks are onto something really good here. And Maya was involved in it too last time too.
Yeah, I have my hand raised because it literally primarily fell on our office to staff and deal with it. So the workload was really public defender heavy. We had to provide all of our legal assistance to do screening in advance to determine people's situations, because if they had, say, a significant warrant out of a county or city, in fact, there were cities in Whatcom County that refused to participate. So if they had warrants in those jurisdictions, we had to navigate that with them and make sure that, if someone walked in with a murder out of King County, we would need to know that and advise them that we couldn't help them and probably not disclose that information. And we were dealing with people who weren't really technically our clients yet. So there's a lot of in many circumstances, so there's some concerns about, that, and are there conflicts? And, so I think there are a lot of complications, and it was very, very work heavy for our staff. We had to pull them from their normal job duties and have them be over in the courthouse for hours at a time while people just kind of wandered in. That being said, everyone who volunteered to do the work that day left feeling really gratified, because it was really, you made people happy, generally speaking. So that's always a nice feeling, but it was a very big ask from a staffing perspective, with, I think, a more minimal reward. And the way that warrants people are not getting warrants unless they're not showing up on their trial date. And those people typically have a lawyer in our office, and we get them back on the calendar and get it lifted if the person has an interest in getting it lifted. It's just not that burdensome. It's just a different dynamic now, I think. I think there are less warrants, frankly. I don't know, Tank, we may disagree about that, and maybe I'm wrong. I'm really just going off my and just the manner in which we get warrants quashed is really different. So it's without countywide buy-in, when you've got certain cities that aren't lifting, it's I don't know how actually helpful it is to people. That's my take on it.
Thank you, Maya. Eric Ritchie, I'm sorry, Stephen Glockley first.
Thank you, Sheriff. I'm concerned with what Maya described as the workload put on the public defender. As I understand Sheriff Tank's proposal, it would sort of require a consensus amongst the county jurisdictions to gather together and sort of share the processing, and I would hope then the workload of doing that. I'm not sure. It sounds like you may need attorneys there.
You do need attorneys there. We needed a lot of staff and attorneys.
Yeah,
Absolutely, Sue. I did reach out to district court, and one of the district court judges sent out an introductory email to all the judges in Whatcom County at the other municipalities. So right now, we're trying to get everyone on board. But back to the participation question, what I was told 8 years ago, what happened 8 years ago was it was an issue also with messaging, and it was an issue with trust, trying to get people in. So that's one thing that we're really going to work on if we could get this off the ground, is that messaging first. And that messaging also, we really need the public defender's office involved in that messaging. Eric Rich.
So one thing I wanted to say is last year we had some reluctance from some of the municipalities, but in the end, I think they all showed up. My recollections, we had every jurisdiction showing up. We had Bellingham, Blaine, we had what I see no from Raylene.
No, that's not true.
We had, I mean, I had prosecutors that were handling multiple jurisdictions here working on it. I remember Dave Nelson, Jim Wright, and I have a photograph of it, but we had most of the jurisdictions participating. And we were able to do, we were able to quash warrants, in multiple jurisdictions at the same time, which was, pretty darn nice.
Thank you. Eric Peterson.
Yeah, I don't, was DOC and Department of Corrections involved in that one last year at all? No, I know I'd be all for it, actually. It's extremely challenging because I know we have individuals that we share that are pending, and also ones that are currently on supervision that have warrants. And on the Department of Corrections perspective, it would have to be a case-by-case thing. If we could handle a warrant through our system. We don't really quash, but we can cancel and work with somebody if they're willing to work with us, but it would have to be a case-by-case thing. So that could present some challenges if they have multiple warrants, and we would be one of those other jurisdictions, I guess, that would factor into that.
Absolutely. Thank you. And I think now we have Peter.
Oh, yes, thanks. So I'm fairly new to this, so pardon my ignorance. I've got a few questions. I've heard that we have something like 5,000 outstanding warrants in this county. And if that is the case, is that average? Do we have a lot more than others? What are other counties doing as far as quashing? And is there, I guess, two other kind of follow-up related questions are, I would imagine the load on the people with the warrants is fairly high. I mean, they have to be very careful of not getting pulled over, for instance. Maybe they're always looking over their shoulder. Or there's some real motivations there to take care of their warrant. And then as far as our system goes, is it helpful for us to quash warrants? And 20, it sounds like we did 20 last time it was done. If it's true that there are 5,000, I'm just wondering how you scale this up and if that is something that we would want to do. It's a lot of questions. I'd be happy to hear any responses.
Well, in terms of the numbers, I've heard 5,000, I've heard 10,000. And I would defer to Raylene. Maybe she has a clearer picture of those numbers. I will tell you, though, that in terms of the amount of staffing that it takes, one of the questions I did ask Washington courts is if there was additional staffing or needs for staffing, is there a way that they could assist in funding with that? So that's something that they're looking into right now. Raylene?
Okay, thanks. Sorry, my voice isn't, it's working somewhat today, so bear with me. That's why I asked Hank to step in. So on the warrants, there's different things with municipalities and with district and superior court. So I'm going to start with the municipalities. Some of the municipalities have court once a week. Some of them are bi-weekly. Most of the municipalities allow individuals that have a warrant to come in and quash them when they have court, and then they can pull the files. Because the municipalities have been in booking restrictions for a long time, misdemeanor and gross misdemeanor cases don't always get booked because of the booking restrictions. So a lot of those defendants know that they can basically commit certain offenses and they're not going to go to jail and there's not going to be consequences. So there's been a lot of comments that it's Warrant Wednesday or Warrant Friday, because a lot of individuals know this and that there's not going to be anything that happens to them. The consequences that are concerning is the individuals that have misdemeanor warrants and have felony warrants, because they might get a charge in a municipality that they would want to resolve, but because they have a felony charge, they're afraid to go because they'll know they'll get booked on the felony case when they go to court in the municipal calendars. They could see that that would be troublesome. If they show up, they might get booked on that, and then they would have to resolve the misdemeanor case as well. On the numbers, I just ran a report. It hasn't came back yet for Superior Court, but I will get back to you on current active outstanding warrants, and I can probably get somebody in district court to run the municipalities in district court numbers for you to see what that is. Average municipal courts run about 150 to 300 warrants. District and Superior Courts, I'm not sure of without getting those exact numbers, and I'll run those queries. On the Superior Court case, if somebody wants to quash a warrant, they can contact the public defender's office, or and they'll get on the or prosecutors, and they'll get on the docket to get their warrant resolved. When I spoke with Judge Grockmull and the Undersheriff Harris about this, Judge Grockmull was for it, in support of it, but said it takes a lot. And I think the last one that was done, if I recall correctly, there wasn't a lot of publicity in a timely manner. And I think everybody that did go did try to support this. It's just, I think maybe we could look at it differently. And when Judge Grockmull was reviewing it, she said, you know, sometimes it's not about quashing the warrants as much as it is of resolving the cases. And if you have all the players in one location, whether they have a case at a Blaine, Everson, Sumas District, and Superior Court, you might be able to come to a universal agreement, which takes a lot more planning and a lot more individual participation. So there is a lot of work that's involved in doing something like that. As Maya pointed out, it does put a lot of strain on the public defender's office. But I think it is definitely worth looking into, and maybe we can all put our heads together to see if at least some things could be looked at on what outstanding warrants are there, and is there possible resolutions. I know when I spoke with some of the judges in the municipal courts and the clerks, they were in support of it, but they don't have the staff as much as we do. So and even it would put a strain on my staff as well, because the criminal, I only have 3 criminal clerks, and you know, we have hearings going all day long every day of the week. And so I don't have other people that can just jump into those roles. So it does have to be very carefully scheduled to make sure that we have the space available and the participants available. Thanks.
Stephen.
You know, in light of some of the resource constraints and the logistical issues people have talked about, I guess I would ask, is there a reason why we need to compress this into one point in time for a warrant quash day? Or could we have, and publicize quite extensively over time, some availability? If we could notify people that every court is open to this on such and such calendars, and people could access those. We could have special times, because I think the off hours that Sheriff Tank was talking about are important. But if it were more a continuous availability for this kind of service, the crunch of resource demands might be spread out. That's just an idea that came to me listening to some of the concerns. The other question I have is, I'm sure we don't have any data compiled because we have very little data compiled, but could we compile data on what the racial and ethnic breakdowns of warrants are, and if we found that there were even greater disparities there than in other areas of the system, I would say we should push as hard as we can to make this happen, because that would be a place that would prompt some reduction in those disparities.
And thank you for those comments. And hopefully, once we get the numbers, I don't know specifically how easy it will be to find that data. So hopefully it's there, but we'll see. Maya.
Thanks. I think that an educational campaign, which seems like what Stephen is describing, could be a good move for the IPRTF and sort of a useful thing for the community. It could set out the courts, the information about how to contact the public defender who services that court. And I mean, there's never a guarantee that a judge isn't going to exercise their right to remand someone on a warrant. I mean, you can only, no lawyer would promise that either. So, I mean, there is, I think that what helped with the quash day was that there was an agreement that once people kind of got through our screening process, as long as they met the criteria, that there would be a guarantee for a quash. But it was like the screening and going through that criteria was really challenging to do on a mass basis like that. And with all these people around, it's really better attuned to an individual consultation with their lawyer. So I think having an educational campaign that links folks, lets them know if you have a warrant, talk to your public defender. I think that was a good idea.
Absolutely. And I think to Stephen's point, if we had something continuous, that would be great. My fear is even trying to have one day we're hearing about resources, personnel resources. But certainly, I think when we look at alternatives to incarceration, that we should consider all ideas. Thank you. Eric Ritchie.
Yeah, so one of the benefits we had about Warrant Quash Day was having a one-stop shop. And I've heard people say that we didn't have participation from the other municipalities, but we did. We had a lot of municipalities there, if not, I mean most of them were there, and it allowed a person to come in who didn't understand where their warrant was from and get it quashed, which was amazing because people, you might not know this, but a lot of folks have numerous warrants in numerous courts, and they don't know where their warrant has come from. So when they were able to come in here and get it all done at once, I mean, it was very beneficial to those people. And we're talking about number of individuals served. I don't think it was 20 warrants. I think it were 20 people that were served, and that was again, I think good.
Thank you. Really.
And back to Eric's point, I think Everson, Sumas, Blaine, Linden, I think Ferndale actually participated in Whatcom County District and Superior Court. I think Bellingham did participate to the point that they could walk across the street to the Bellingham Municipal Court. I don't think they were actually in the building. And, a lot of the problems with people that have warrants is their poverty, and they don't have transportation, and the county doesn't have the best transportation for the outer lying jurisdictions. And so when you have somebody that has a warrant in Linden and Ferndale, and Sumas, and you tell them that they can all go to that one location, and take care of all of them at one time, that's very beneficial. So that person isn't trying to jump around. And to Eric's point of people that not knowing where they're going, I don't know how many people I see come into our office and they're looking for district court or Bellingham Municipal Court. And, you know, it's written on the paperwork, they get their paperwork, but, you know, they lose their paperwork, they're couch surfing, and they don't always know where to go. And so having it advertised more heavily and maybe working on resolutions ahead of time to be selective on some of the people, to say, yeah, if you show up, we may be able to resolve your case. I think that would be more beneficial in some restrictions, because I know the prosecutors and the defense attorneys' hands are tied to judicial decisions and severity of cases, not with other cases that could be from other counties, because we'd be looking at Whatcom County specific and maybe DOC. But I'm, you know, just thinking out loud here on different areas of it. So thanks.
Thank you. So lastly, I'll say, oh, I'm sorry, Peter.
Oh, I just wanted to say that I like the thinking here and seeing this as a marketing problem, not just a legal problem. And there is a lot of confusion around these issues for folks. As I have often said, the people least fit often to understand such a complex system are the very folks who are subject to it. And perhaps one thing that we can do is to use marketing as a solution to bring people to a quash day or to the proper court if there are certain calendar days that it would be beneficial for them to get there. And that's certainly something that is quite doable. I think we've seen this committee has used social media to great effect to find new members in a way that had never been done before. And perhaps we could use some of those same social networking marketing techniques to do so. Just a thought.
I agree, but I also believe that part of that marketing strategy shouldn't necessarily the messaging shouldn't necessarily come from the sheriff's office. Because oftentimes when you tell someone, yeah, you know, the sheriff's office or any law enforcement agency, that we're having this particular day for you, a lot of people just don't believe that. So, you know, it's part of building trust, but also, you know, again, when we talk about alternatives to incarceration, when we talk about, you know, being fair, swift, that I think this all plays into it. So, any other questions or thoughts? Awesome. So next we're on number 4, the committee statement of work for the Incarceration Prevention Reduction Task Force and Committee Reconfiguration and Focus. Peter.
Yes. Well, let's see. I in your packet, I believe was something we'd written up. We're looking at a 12-month plan for the IPR and distributing, we're proposing distributing the projects of the implementation plan to each of the committees. And so I've made a proposal here, and I just wanted to have some discussion around, you know, what your thoughts are on focusing our efforts in this committee on these certain projects and making headway on them. You know, we have, you know, I've I'm fairly new to this committee and to this position, so I'm not going to speak for what your experience has been. But we share a lot of information in these committees quite often. I think in my experience, there has been perhaps some slipping of the gears, if you will, between information and action, and lifting up our advisory role and really making clear and actionable recommendations that we can move forward with. So that's really what I came here to say. And let's see, let's take a look at it. So for this committee, just looking at all the projects of the implementation plan and then breaking them down by committee, I was suggesting we consider implementation plan project 11 to bolster reentry support services, including establishing locations where people can receive coordinated reentry support services, etc. Project 13, continue to make changes in court systems to reduce the number of people who are incarcerated, decrease the length of time they are detained before trial, and explore options in lieu of bail. It's certainly something we're talking about today. Project 14, expedite access to competency restoration services through advocacy at the state level and exploration of development of outpatient alternatives, such as prosecutorial diversion program, assisted outpatient treatment. And then the other one I plugged in there, a subcommittee or a work group, I believe, of this committee is the pretrial processes work group, which I spent a lot of time investigating last week, and it's just so fascinating, the work that's being done there. And I just thought that perhaps after 5 years of work, perhaps it was time not only to review the charter of this group and its constitution, who's sitting in these seats and doing the work, but also to look at that work group and see what more supports are needed. Just look to see what their again, review their charter and see how we can help move their work forward. So those are my proposals. I'd love to hear any conversation around those.
So Peter, is the idea to add these different tasks to the charter of each committee, or revamp the scope and purpose of each committee?
Well, it seems to me that most of these charters were written long ago. I mean, we're talking 7 years ago. So many things have changed. And I think it would be good for each chair, co-chairs to look at the charter and to see if it is still current, make any updates or changes. For instance, in one of our committees, the Crisis Stabilization Facility Committee, that one is very well out of date, I would say, and we're likely going to change its constitution, its charter, to include other facilities, not just that one. So it is a time for us to review where we've been, review our charter, and to consider that we went through a whole process in the last couple of years of gap analysis, using the SIM. We came up with a whole implementation plan for the Justice Project. A really good work was done there, and it seems like to have our committees focus on, each take a set of those projects, discrete projects, and focus on those and have actionable results come from them, would be a reasonable way for this committee and the other committees to move forward. Does that help?
It does. I would say for the crisis, I would say for the Crisis Stabilization Facility Committee, as it stands today, and if it was to change to the actual committee for the part of the Justice Project, the scope of the Committee for the Justice Project is much bigger than the Crisis Stabilization Committee. So people that have volunteered for that particular committee, do you believe that is there going to be a new process, or will it be the same people? Will some people that's on the Crisis Stabilization Committee not be on that committee? So how do you vision that?
Yeah, so Perry's in this meeting, and he is the chair of that, and he could speak to this. But my thought is that if we were to fold in, for instance, planning for the 23-hour facility and other facilities, that the constitution of that body would necessarily need to change. And we don't have to discuss the details of that committee in this committee meeting, but if it's helpful as an example to have some discussion around it today, I'm totally willing.
For me, I'm willing to wait for that discussion.
Okay.
Any other thoughts?
I sorry to jump in real quick here, but to offer that originally, obviously, the Crisis Stabilization Facility Subcommittee was really about getting the building built and moving things forward. We ran into the unfortunate circumstances of COVID-19 as we were opening that building and sort of work through those challenges and etc. It makes a lot of sense to me in terms of the similarity relative to the 23-hour crisis relief center and those dynamics. So those pieces make a lot of sense to me. Widening it, and that's something that I want to spend some time with. So I've looked over the material that that got put together, just relative to taking a look at committees and reconfiguration and etc. There could conceivably be an expansion beyond, obviously that was part of the purpose of my involvement in it. Ann Deacon was originally the chair, and as she decided, in an untimely fashion to retire, that I was sort of second in place there, just in terms of knowledge and support, the facility and so forth. There was even discussion early on about possibly closing that particular subcommittee by virtue of the fact that the facility had been built and had been established, and and etc. So I certainly don't take it personal. I'm more than willing to, and this makes a lot of sense to me, to do the review, and considerations. And at the same time, I think challenge, and it could be true for other subcommittee chairs, of the time that they have available. I want to do a good job. That's always my target and purpose. And and I'm spread out, pretty far. And that may not be, a unique experience by any stretch of the imagination, just in terms of the availability of resources in depending on what moving those action items, to that point, would be. I think the concept is really important. And then, looking at the reality of the resources to match that is all I'm suggesting, not that I have to do or something of that nature.
I would rush to say that it is my great interest as co-chair of the IPR to return time to staff members and electeds to them to do the actual work. And so all I'm looking for here is greater focus for the time that we spend in these meetings, so that we can get the actual work done and deliver the services that we're responsible for. So I'm looking for partnership in this. I'm looking for ideas, and I hear again and again how many meetings people are in and how little comes of them. So this is really the crux of what we're trying to do here. It's a time to review with new leadership, and I encourage you all to be thinking about it and getting back to your co-chairs. Myself, I'm always available to hear. So that's where we are.
Thank you, Peter. So right on time, looks like we have about 13 minutes left. So agenda items for the June joint meeting with the Behavioral Health Committee. Raylene?
I'm always open to anything from any of the legal and justice partners on what you feel we should be bringing to the joint meeting. And that's something we can also I can discuss with Mike Parker and Dan Hamill. And if people have thoughts of things that they want to bring towards that, I think that would be beneficial. Something that did just come up for me as I was appointed to the Gender and Justice Commission for the state when I took on this role. And that meeting was on Friday in Seattle. And so when I went down there, they were actually talking about some of the pretrial services work groups and some of the tools that they've been working on. And I know that's been an ongoing process, but they discussed that a lot of the tools that have been looked at in the past were for screening tools that were very gender specific, especially when it came to domestic violence participants. And when there were violent crimes, males were more likely to reoffend than women when it was a violent, and those tools assessed on where individuals would be placed. And so they said that one of the tools was a WARNA tool, and it wasn't gender specific. So as we're looking at some of these tools, and that's something that we might actually just want to bring to the pretrial services work group. But that was definitely of interest to me. The other thing that we had a report on was from Court Forms that was done by Tukwila Municipal Court, and they're using the forms that actually work in that will work with Tyler. They currently work with GIS, which is the Judicial Information System. Those forms were translated into 3 different types of languages. They were also focused on domestic violence, but when a judge would read them in court, a no contact order, the language was also printed out of their specific language right underneath that. So when they were handed a copy of the order after the hearing, it would be in English on the top as the preferential language, and then whether it was Spanish or Punjabi or Russian, I think were the 3, and they were working on making those available to other courts. I think she said that there was 28 courts in the state right now that were using that system. And that might be beneficial to work in conjunction with behavioral health on how more courts can be using that for different race and ethnicity. So those were just something I brought back with me from there. Otherwise, I see Jill's hand up.
Yeah, I just wanted to let you all know that for the June joint meeting, a couple of items have been suggested by others. From the Behavioral Health Committee, Brian Estes is going to talk about framing adversity, trauma, and resilience. And there's also been a suggestion to invite Skagit Judge Howson to talk about the Skagit County Community Court Program.
Thank you.
Excellent, thanks. Maya?
Mike? Oh, sorry.
Hey, I guess I've heard, maybe someone can confirm for me, is Bellingham starting a community court?
I'm not sure on that. I could check with Darlene. I know they're also in the process of getting a new administrator in Bellingham.
I've been down there to see the community court from Judge Howson, and I don't think it's a model that really is county appropriate necessarily. Like, it was really used for prostitution offenses and trespassing offenses at the casino. It's very limited. Very, very high utilizer of services. The model is that the services all basically show up and wait at the court for people to show up. I saw very little clients participating. I'd really like to, I want to focus on programs that make sense for the scale that we're looking at. And maybe Bellingham's going to try something like that. And maybe that's appropriate for a municipal court, but I don't know that that scales to us. So I just, in terms of what we're spending our time doing. Thanks.
Thanks, Maya. Peter?
For the joint meeting, and I don't know if this is warranted to get this on the schedule, and Perry, you'd be able to speak to this, but an update on the prosecutorial diversion program and in relation to restoration services. I know that we've dealt with that before. Is there an update that is warranted?
I did a fairly recent update, but I'm more than happy to, to briefly bring that in and share. We do have a meeting this Friday. We're still going over some material that we were looking at in April. So I'm available.
I was only suggesting if there are real updates to be given. So
I don't know if there's anything terribly viable in terms of an update at this point in time.
And Raylene, do we have anything else for this one?
I don't think so. I think the only thing that we might want to look at is Peter's mentioning earlier, the restructuring and looking at our individuals for the Legal and Justice Task Force. I know there's people retiring and different positions changing. We might want to reach out to some of our other municipalities and county partners to see if there's more interest in joining this subcommittee. But otherwise, I don't think we have anything. I think we can turn it over to Jill for public comment.
Thank you. We do have one person attending. If you'd like to speak to the committee, please virtually raise your hand now. Yeah, no hands are raised.
All right, everyone. Well, thank you so much. And it was enjoyable to fill in for Raylene, and everyone have a nice day.
Thank you.
Thank you. See you all later.